We're here back in the Fantasy Bar week 6, ready to go. 6 guys fresh off the tap for you on FanDuel and DraftKings, and we're going to roll it back again. It's happy hour every single play under 7,000 on DraftKings to make life easier on you guys. We've got a cheap quarterback wide receiver pairing as part of a game stack. We've got a contrarian spot I think we can pay up for to be different in tournaments. Couple running backs I think are in smash spots, and of course, my favorite play on the entire slate. Who are we talking about? Only one way to find out. It's time to belly up to the Fantasy Bar. Welcome in, guys. Week 6 edition Beers Daily Fantasy 6-pack. Good to be back here, opening up the Fantasy Bar once again. 6 of my favorite plays ready for you to go here on FanDuel and DraftKings. Thank you, as always, for stopping by, hanging out in the Fantasy Bar, and checking out this week's video. Now, before we get into the plays, the housekeeping, you guys did a great job. With that thumbs up button, you unlocked the free month of RotoGrinders Premium NFL. So let's keep it rolling. And I'm challenging you guys. Let's try to beat last week's numbers. That's the tip jar here. Free video. All we're asking in return. That thumbs up button. Subscribe to the channel. Check us out over at scoresandodds.com/beer for all of your sports betting needs. All right. Last week, solid. Let's continue to roll here in week 6. Let's start at the running back position with Kyon Williams of the Rams. So Williams, kind of a down game. We saw Cooper Kupp come back to the lineup, playing from behind the majority of that game. So I'm going to throw that one out, give him a pass, and go right back to the well on him here this week in a much better matchup than he saw last week against Philadelphia with Arizona on the docket. Now, first point, you guys know I love home favorite running backs. We get that here with the Rams. Look like 7-point favorites in this game. And Williams, one of the few workhorse running backs that we have out there, and the price doesn't really reflect that here on DraftKings. This guy's seeing over 90% of the work in the backfield, involved in 78% of the passing game last week with routes run. So really involved in both aspects of the game. The Cardinals not been involved in any aspect of stopping opposing running backs. We're talking bottom 10 in rushing yards, rushing touchdowns, receptions, receiving touchdowns, and that has led to them giving up the 4th most fantasy points to this position. So let's throw out last week. I think Kyon Williams bounces back in a major way here this week against the Arizona Cardinals. All right, I mentioned a pay up to be contrarian spot. We're going to do that at tight end with TJ Hockenson. Now we're talking cash games for tight ends. It's much easier to go cheap. There's certainly some viable options down there that I like. Tournaments, so I think we want to get a little bit different here. So there's a lot to like here about Hockenson. First up, that fact, we pay up to be contrarian. Secondly, we know Justin Jefferson out of that lineup. A lot of people talking about Jordan Addison, KJ Osborne, hell, even Brandon Powell getting some love out there. Hockenson seems to be forgotten here in this offense, but to me, becomes the #1 receiver with Jefferson on the shelf. We know the targets got to go somewhere. Hockenson has been getting a steady amount of targets here, 8 or more targets in 4 of the first 5 games for this Minnesota team, who we know loves to throw the ball here. So double-digit targets, not out of the question here for TJ Hockenson. Chicago, on the other hand, not been good against tight ends, giving up a ton of receptions, yards, touchdowns, fantasy points, bottom 10 in every single one of those categories here. So I don't think the ownership going to be as high as it should here. I think Hockenson has a big day against this awful Chicago Bears defense. All right, I promised you a cheap quarterback. We are rolling with the stash, Gardner Minshew of the Colts. So unfortunate injury for Anthony Richardson. Going to have him on the shelf for at least 4 weeks here. Opens the door for Gardner Minshew. And the thing I really like this week, it's a lot easier to go cheaper at quarterback when you're not competing with Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, who's not been great, but we know has a ceiling. None of those guys are on the main slate. So it's a much easier bar for Gardner Minshew to be a contributor in our lineups and give us a score that doesn't put us behind the 8 ball with some of these high-end rushing quarterbacks. Jacksonville, a team we know, pretty good against the ground game, not great against the passing game. And we have some easy stacking partners here that don't cost you a ton with Gardner Minshew either. Pretty clear target tree here. Yes, there's a lot of guys that get targets, but there's a few main guys, and you may see one coming up here shortly in the video here. But also, Jacksonville, we mentioned, not great against the pass. We're talking bottom 6 so far this season. Passing yards, passing touchdowns, fantasy points. And if you guys have been with me over the last decade or so of these videos, and even if you're new, you know I love me a revenge narrative here. Gardner Minshew returning to where it all started in Jacksonville. So you add it all up, we get a cheap price, we get a great matchup, we get a team that's likely going to have to throw more than they'd want to, and we get a revenge narrative. Give me some Gardner Minshew this week as my favorite quarterback. All right, next play, we're going to pair him up with the cheap receiver here. We're talking rookie wide receiver, Josh Downs. It's one of the trends we've really noticed over the last couple seasons. Some of these rookie wide receivers, it might take them a couple weeks to get acclimated, but as the season goes along, the role starts to grow, the confidence starts to grow, and the production starts to grow. And we're seeing that right before our eyes here with Josh Downs. So the price is really lacking behind what this guy has been doing. The role continues to grow. Not just an underneath receiver, can get down the field and make some contested catches. All the things we saw when he was at North Carolina are playing out here with the Indianapolis Colts. And I think this is a big upgrade with Gardner Minshew under center over an Anthony Richardson. With Minshew, been very productive. Now, Michael Pittman, we know, 30% target share, but Downs 25% target share with Gardner Minshew in the lineup here. We mentioned it with Minshew. Jacksonville's struggles have been with the pass. That has included wide receivers, 8th most receiving yards, 3rd most touchdowns, already 6 allowed to the wide receiver position. So at a little bit over 9,000, the pairing of Minshew Downs really going to open some things up here for your lineups. And I think he has his biggest day yet as a pro. Josh Downs, my favorite value play for week 6. All right, we're not done with that game. Let's go to the other side and run it back on one of our week 1 plays with wide receiver Calvin Ridley. So Ridley was very productive for us in that first video of the season, was season highs with 11 targets, 8 receptions, went over 100 yards, found the end zone. We saw him bounce back and return to form last week as well. And I think he has a very similar game to what we saw in week 1. In fact, I think he outdoes those numbers in this game here. The Colts, we continue to go week in, week out, and we bring up 2 main points. They play fast, and they are awful against wide receivers. Bottom 10 in receptions, receiving yards, fantasy points allowed to this position. Love the game stack here. A lot of ways you can go. I think a lot of people are going to go Trevor Lawrence, paired with both Kirk and Ridley. Don't mind that. But if we can flip the script here and go a little bit cheaper with a Minshew at Downs, you could add a Michael Pittman, run it back with a Ridley and or Christian Kirk. Same game, same stack, just a different way to do it. No matter how you slice it, love Calvin Ridley in the spot against this bad Indianapolis secondary. All right, it's time. Take a look at my favorite play for week 6. Before we do that, let's continue our Beast of the Week contest. And again, we have upgraded to our biggest prize ever. We are now giving away 1 month of RotoGrinders Premium NFL to whoever wins this Beast of the Week contest. So take a second, click that thumbs up button if you have not already, then head to the comment section and let me know fantasy points on FanDuel this week for my Beast of the Week. Whoever has the closest guess to that production over on FanDuel, you're going to win that free month of RotoGrinders Premium NFL. And while you're down there, give me your guess for fantasy points for the Beast. I also want to know if you're 10 in the bar, who is your Beast of the Week here for week 6? Sound off in that YouTube comment section. All right, let's wrap this baby up with my favorite play for week 6. You know, Matt, the Beast of the Week. All right, Beast time. We owe you one more running back. We are going down to Miami. We are rolling with Raheem Mostert of the Dolphins, this week's Beast of the Week. So unfortunate injury to the rookie. Devon Achane was killing it out there. We could have the return of Jeff Wilson Jr. That window is certainly open. I'm not worried about any of that here with Raheem Mostert. We talked about last week. My favorite spot was the Lions at home against Carolina. They put 42 on the board. Montgomery could have had an even bigger day, but got the job done for us. This is the spot I love the most this week is Miami at home. However you want to go, the passing game is always in play here. I prefer the running game here with Raheem Mostert against the Carolina Panthers. We'll get to them here in a minute, but Mostert been a touchdown machine. Touchdowns in 4 of the first 5 games, 8 total touchdowns on a game against Denver. Certainly helped out that total. But Carolina, like we mentioned, awful against running backs. They've given up 8 rushing touchdowns already. That's tied with Denver for the most in the league. And they only trail the awful Denver defense in rushing yards and fantasy points allowed. Only the Broncos been worse in those numbers here than Carolina. Huge home favorites here for the Miami Dolphins. Yes, they're going to work some other guys in that lineup, but I think that's after Raheem Mostert puts at least 2 touchdowns on the board here. Calling my shot, Raheem Mostert, easily my favorite play on the board in this week's Beast of the Week. All right, guys, that'll do it here for week 6 in the Fantasy Bar. As always, if you have any comments, questions, or feedback, hit me up in that comment section right below the video. Don't forget, Raheem Mostert's fantasy points on FanDuel for your shot at a free month of RotoGrinders Premium NFL. And who is your Beast of the Week? If you could pick anybody on the board, you're 10 of the bar here. Who's your top play? Let's talk some NFL Week 6 in that YouTube comment section. Don't forget, thumbs up button. Let's try to beat last week's numbers, challenging you guys. So I appreciate that. Subscribe to the channel. Check us out over at scoresandodds.com/beer. All right, that'll do it for RotoGrinders.com. I am Beer saying salute. Thank you so much for watching, guys. Best of luck here in week 6. Don't forget my Pints and Picks video coming out on Friday with 2 of my favorite NFL bets, 4-0 in that video over the last 2 weeks. So check that out. Guys, thanks again. Good luck. We'll see you next week.
Hey, thanks for checking out our videos. If you want more expert advice on DraftKings, FanDuel, or any other daily fantasy sports, make sure you check out the current videos playlist